2020 is well underway, and with it, a number of emulation changes in RetroArch, so it is time to update all of these old tutorials I have on my channel, so that way the questions you guys ask me are more in line with the videos that are actually provided. For today's tutorial, we are going to be looking at PlayStation 1. PlayStation 1 is the most popular system on my channel, so we are going to start there with the updates and move on accordingly. So if there is another system you'd like to see get set up, just keep an eye out, it'll be there. But anyway, first thing you're gonna need is RetroArch. So head on over to retroarch.com, click on this download link right here, scroll about midway to the bottom here, and you'll see this other download section for nightly builds. Now this is a Windows tutorial for PC, so if you're trying to do this on PS3, Switch, PS4, I don't cover those. I don't know how different the process is. This is strictly for Windows, so click on Windows, x86-64, and then scroll down to the bottom and download retroarch.7-zip. And once you have that downloaded, go ahead and get it extracted. If you don't have 7-zip installed on your computer, do so. A lot of programs use 7-zip, so it is just good to have. Anyway, 7-zip, extract to RetroArch. Good to go. Now this next step is very important. When you open up RetroArch, whatever folder you have it in, that is the folder you need to leave it in. So I'm doing everything from my desktop for demonstration purposes. If you want your RetroArch installed to be in some folder named emulators, put it there, because once you run RetroArch for the first time, it defaults all of its directories into itself, and if you move it, everything will not be programmed correctly. And if that happens to you, you're basically gonna have to delete the config file that RetroArch makes on its first run. Right there. You're gonna delete that, and then you have to start all over from whatever folder you move it into. So just get it right the first time. Save yourself a headache. Anyway, go ahead and open up RetroArch, and it starts windowed. I'm confused as to why it starts windowed, but whatever, it does. Anyway, if you go ahead and press F on your keyboard, it will make it full screen. From here, let's go ahead and get our PlayStation Core installed. So head on down to Online Updater, Core Updater, press up on your keyboard, and scroll on up to Sony PlayStation. And we're going to download the Beetle PSX Hardware Edition. Once you have that downloaded, go ahead and press backspace twice on your computer, on your keyboard, I mean. Meh. And from here, there is a little bit of setup we need to do because the PlayStation Core does require a BIOS. So if you don't have one, you can't use your games. So if you try to load a game now, after downloading the core, oops, load content, I have all my stuff on the desktop, so if I try to load a game, it will tell me that the firmware is missing. See, that's one of the nice things about the new versions of RetroArch. It'll tell you if it can't find the firmware files, so very nice. So let's go ahead and get this set up properly then. If we press F on the keyboard, it'll minimize RetroArch into the window again. And then we can open the system folder. And that is where we are going to put our PS1 BIOS. It needs to be named scph5501.bin for US games. I have a tutorial on my channel on how to dump your PlayStation 1 BIOS directly from your PS1 console, or you can use Google. I'm not going to be providing any of these files as it is illegal. No matter how many times people whine at me to provide them, I choose not to participate in illegal activities, so suck it. But anyway, get that BIOS file placed in your system folder, and then we can head back into RetroArch. Now when you try to load a game, it works exactly as it should. Boots right up. And there you go. That's how you set up RetroArch for PS1 games. That's simple. Very nice, quick, easy, straightforward. Of course, there is a lot more to it if you are interested in learning so, but if you just want to get it up and running, that's it. 5 minutes, you're good to go. But from here on out, we're going to be talking about a little bit more of the advanced feature set of RetroArch to get you set up nicely. That way you aren't going to have to be going through this janky file browser system every time. Another cool feature that RetroArch has added since the last time I made my video tutorials is the fact that you can actually play your games from physical discs. If you have PS1 games, You can go ahead and pop them into your DVD drive if you happen to actually still have one. You can load your core for PlayStation, and then click on Load Disc. Now, I haven't had the most success with this. It really stutters a ton in cutscenes and stuff like that, but gameplay's worked fine. See, look how nasty that is. I don't know why it does this for the videos. Like, honestly, this game is flawless. This copy of Mega Man X4 is so flawless. I've never seen one this minty. And as soon as the videos are done, like, the game runs exactly as it should, so it's really odd. Very hit and miss. I really don't recommend playing from your original discs. Like, it's really cool, but definitely not the greatest way of doing it on RetroArch at the moment. The other cool option that's been added to RetroArch is the fact that you can actually dump your own physical games. So I recorded myself dumping Mega Man X4 yesterday. It takes about half an hour per disc. It's quite a long process, but the dumps work great. And once it's done dumping the disc, you can find it in your downloads folder in RetroArch, and it will be named weird, so you are going to have to edit it. And when you edit it, make sure that you also edit the Q file, otherwise it will not work. So go ahead and open up Notepad and change the name in parentheses to whatever you named the bin file. And you'll be good to go. Okay, but let's go over how to load up games a lot easier, make it look a lot better than trying to load up everything through the file directory browser, because that sucks. So first off, head on down to this Show Desktop Menu button here, press enter, and it'll bring you to the RetroArch desktop menu. Now, if you've already loaded a PS1 game, this is a nice indication to tell you if you have stuff set up besides the whole missing BIOS thing, but it will show you what you need for each core that you have and if you have it or not. Let's go ahead and make a PlayStation 1 playlist. So over here, you're going to right click, new playlist, type in Sony, space dash space, PlayStation. And make sure you capitalize the S, otherwise you will not get this awesome PlayStation icon. You'll get some weird looking rocket. Anyway, click on it, and then right click over here and add files. Now, I have my PS1 games on my desktop as well, just for demonstration purposes. So PS1 games, 40 winks. Let's go ahead and add the Q file to our playlist. Now this is for PlayStation. And there it is. And we're going to do the same for our other games. Now, as you probably noticed, I skipped over a bunch of multi-disc games right now, so I'm going to show you why. If we open up our PS1 game folder, we've got Chrono Cross. So Chrono Cross is 2 discs. If we want to include it on our playlist, we need to make an M3U playlist file, so that way we can change discs between the game. So from here, go ahead and right click, make a new text document, name it whatever you want to have the game show up as. And then just press enter for now. And now we're going to go ahead and open that text document. And we're going to paste in the Q file names into that text document. Just like that. Now go ahead and save it. Exit out. And now we're going to rename the extension from text to M3U. Now we'll go back into our RetroArch desktop menu, add files, and then add the M3U file, same way we would our Q files. And there's our multi-disc game. Now to get these to show up inside of RetroArch, we're going to go ahead and exit out of both the desktop menu and RetroArch and restart it. And now if we press left on the keyboard, it will take us to a nice playlist of all of our PS1 games. So now what we could do is we could just go ahead and press enter on any one of these and it'll load right up. Or not. But now let's go over how to change discs for multi-disc games, because that is very important. So we're going to go ahead and boot up our Chrono Cross playlist here. And I'm going to put it on disc 2 real quick. So from here, if I press new game, it is going to ask me to insert disc 1. So I'm going to press F1 on my keyboard. It should bring you to the quick menu. So you're going to scroll down until you see disk control. I mean, you already saw me do this to change the disc 2, but now we're going to go through a more detailed explanation. So go into disk control. You're going to press enter on eject disk. And there is this current disk index. So that will list all of the disks in your M3U playlist. So disk 1, disk 2, disk 3, disk 4, etc. So we need to be on disk 1, so we're going to go ahead and change that down to disk 1. Press insert disk. Press enter. And it'll bring you right to the character naming, and you are good to go. Man, this game is so good. But anyway, that's playlists and multi-disc games in a nutshell, but this doesn't look that pretty, does it? It's just a disc image and nothing else really. So is there anything we could do to make this look a little nicer? Absolutely. If you go down to the desktop menu, click on your Sony PlayStation playlist, click back over into the main thing, and if you right click on something, you can download the thumbnails. As long as the game is named and has a region, it should just automatically get you a thumbnail. If not, you can download your own thumbnails and just drag them right over to it, and it works just fine. As you can see, 40 Winks doesn't have a region code, so it doesn't know what the frick it is. Ta-da! Anyway, go ahead and close back out of that. Full screen up RetroArch. And now if you go back over to your PS1 playlist, you get some nice box arts for the ones that you have chosen to download it for. Now, this wouldn't be one of my tutorials if we didn't spend a little time talking about the settings that are included in the RetroArch cores for the emulated systems. So we're pulling out our good friend Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 here to help me demonstrate. Anyways, press F1 on your keyboard to go to the quick menu and scroll on down to options. I'm not going to spend as much time on this as I have in previous video tutorials because RetroArch now has awesome detailed descriptions of what everything does. So rather than go over each individual option, let's just talk about some of the ones I think are important to do. So first up, renderer. If you have a relatively new graphics card, anything that is newer than 2013, I recommend using Vulkan because it will give you a nice speed boost. If your card doesn't support Vulkan, it'll automatically drop back down to OpenGL, so there really isn't any issue here. Next one a lot of you guys are going to want to use is internal GPU resolution. This is how you upscale your games, so you could go up to 16 times native PS1 resolution. Do note that if you go this high, you are probably going to run into some performance issues because that is exceptionally high. So I honestly just set mine to 4 and leave it at that if I'm going to have it upscale at all. I really like original graphics. I love accuracy to the original experience, so that's always been my thing. But just to give you an example of what it looks like here. Pretty neat. Now, the next one is for color depth. For this one, you can change it from 16 to 32 bits. But if you're going to have it on 32 bits with the Vulkan renderer, you do need to disable the dithering pattern. This gets rid of dither completely to make colors look really, really nice. Texture filtering, this is really personal choice. I leave mine on nearest. I like nearest. Let's move on to the next one I think a lot of you are going to want to use. So the PGXP modes are really great for older PS1 games. I'm sure you've noticed as I've been playing how the textures seem to warp and move around. That is what PGXP is there to fix. It will get rid of those warpings. So go ahead and turn it to memory only, vertex cache on, texture correcting. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on internal FPS here as well for the next part. But as you can see, there is no more warping. It is stable. It's a little warpy still, but it's a lot better than it used to be, and honestly makes the game look way better than it did. Now for the next options, if you've been paying attention to that internal FPS counter here, you can see that the frame rate is all over the place for this game. It goes from 30 down to 20s, depending what's going on. It's like 22, 18, there we go. We dropped below 20 FPS. So if you want to overclock your PS1 games to make them sit at a locked performance, you can do that in emulation. So enable GTE overclock, and then you can also overclock the frequency. Do note that sometimes this will break things, but hey, you can experiment with it and see what happens. So I'm just going to turn mine to 150% right now, and let's see the performance difference that we're going to have. As you can see, now we have a locked 30. No more jumps, no more spikes, no more dips. It is locked. It is flawless. It's amazing. Some other things I think you guys might be interested in is the skip BIOS option. If you don't like seeing that Sony boot logo every time, go ahead and turn this on. If you want to try out widescreen hacks, you could turn this one on. I don't care for them personally, but you could give them a shot, see what happens. The CD access method, this I recommend changing over to asynchronous or pre-cache. If you don't mind waiting a little bit when the game starts up, pre-cache will load your entire CD image into RAM, making load times much faster. You can also increase the CD loading speeds, so that way it will go faster on initial level loads. It can break stuff, so I just leave mine at native. I really don't mind. And then, of course, the enable DualShock analog mode toggle. This is very important, and they now has a hotkey. You can enable it by holding down L1, R1, L2, R2, plus start and select, and it'll toggle the analog mode. Of course, before you can use that, you do need to change your controls, so if you go down from options to controls, go to port 1 controls, you can select what type of controller you are using in your PS1 emulator. So by default, it just uses the digital only PlayStation controller. You could change that over to the DualShock, analog controller, analog joystick, gun con, another light gun, or a mouse. So for our demonstration purposes here, we're going to change it over to a DualShock, and we're going to demonstrate that analog mode toggle right here. So right now I'm using the D-pad, and then I'm gonna enable the hotkey here. Oops, that just in-game reset. Nice. What a terrible hotkey. Alright, anyway. So the hotkey did work. The analog sticks are now turned on. That's what I'm using to play with now. But anyway, let's load up a game that will show you all of the cool controllers that you can actually use on this emulator. And now you are witnessing one of the downfalls of having overclock modes enabled. Sometimes games will just not boot right if this stuff is enabled. So let's go ahead and turn all this stuff back down to default. So this is one of the great things about Ace Combat 2. It has a nice 3D representation of whatever controller happens to be plugged in. So if we go down to controls, change it to the PlayStation controller, it changes to the digital only PlayStation controller. DualShock, the dual analog controller, the analog joystick. Like, this is freaking cool. If you have an adapter, you can actually plug this into the computer, and it makes playing Ace Combat 2 freaking incredible. No controller plugged in with the gun con, justifier, mouse. And then this thing is so interesting. I want to get one of these in real life just because this is so weird. Like, look at this. Oh, it's so freaking weird. But anyway, you can emulate it. Like, it works. It's weird. You can even, like, adjust the way it controls and stuff in the options menu. Like, it's really, really fascinating stuff. Like, look at this. Anyway. So, there's a brief overview of all the controllers available, but I think one of the coolest things is that you can actually use your mouse in games that support PlayStation mouse. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the mouse real quick. And there we go. I'm now playing Command & Conquer Red Alert Retaliation on PS1 emulation using a mouse. Like, this is really cool. And a really great way to play through this game until the remaster comes out in a couple months. But, like, it's freaking cool. Now, there is one more thing I want to cover real quick before we call this tutorial a wrap, and that has to do with the video output. So if you press backspace, you can back out of the quick menu, go right once, and go down to the video option here. Now, if you go down to scaling, there is an integer scale option here. And this might not be important to a lot of you, but not all computer monitors are the right size to scale up these older images perfectly. It makes it so your video output is being scaled to the nearest whole number. So, I mean, if you have a 1080p monitor, that doesn't scale from these old PS1 games correctly. It'll give you half numbers, and it can make things look weird sometimes. So basically, this just makes that not happen. So I think it's worth having it enabled. It makes your picture look crisper, and it's just good. Anyways, I think that just about does it as far as PS1 emulation is concerned. Do make sure that when you are finished getting everything set up how you want it, you do save your core overrides. So go ahead, save core overrides just there. Now, anytime you load up a PS1 game, you are good to go. As always, if you have any questions, just let me know down in the comment section here. If it's something I can help you out with, I will do my best to do so. I will not be providing any illegal files or games. That's stuff you can find on your own. I just will not do it. If you have questions regarding systems other than PC, I do recommend you check out the RetroArch forums for that specific system. Again, I don't know how much different it is. I just don't use them, so I can't offer help for something I haven't used. I'm sorry. But as always, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope it helps you out getting your PS1 games up and running. It's pretty dang straightforward these days, a lot less complicated than it used to be, and performance is just pretty top-notch on most systems now, especially with the hardware renderer. But anyways, that's it for today's video. As always, thank you again for watching, and we will see you all back next video.